Okay, so we want to go over a little classroom about the pendulum turn. We've done a few things this week. We're going to be working more on our pendulum turns, and we're also going to work more on our braking in the turn, doing fast, medium, and slow turns. So first off, we're going to say when we use pendulum turns, we really got to know that it's going to be really a 35 to 45 mile an hour on gravel technique. So anytime we get into a situation where we're going too fast for a handbrake, too slow for a trail brake, we're on a gravel road, we're going to do a pendulum turn. We're also going to use it where we can connect corners together. In a situation where you'd use a pendulum turn might be where you have a left into a right. And when you have a left into a right, you're going to have this swing from this turn to make that turn. So you have to be really good at pendulum turns also, because if you ever get into a situation where you're coming to a turn and for whatever reason you get sideways the wrong way, you need to be able to learn how to come out of that. Instead of most people, they just kind of give up. What do they say? Jesus, take the wheel, scream like a girl, whatever. We're going to use this situation to make that corner. So there's the reasons for using left foot braking. One other reason for using left foot braking, because you can't possibly right foot brake and do a pendulum, because you'd have to let off the gas and hit the brake and release the brake and hit the gas, and it just doesn't work. You're going to be able to ba-dum, ba-dum. So you need both feet to be able to do this. So the first thing is we start on the inside of the turn. That's another thing that's different about the pendulum turn. We're making a left, we stay to the left. We got our 35-meter mark. We're going to start at 35 meters, and we're going to lift off the gas. When I say lift, it's not on a front-wheel drive car, it's not completely lift. We're going to have, like, say, 30, 40% power. So we're going to say lift to 30%. You can have a little more gas if it's slippery, a little less if it's dry. So we're going to say lift to 30%, turn 90 degrees to the right. When we lift and turn 90 degrees to the right, then we're going to brake. And we're probably going to brake at like 30 to 40% braking. Not super hard braking. And then after we lift, turn, and brake, we're going to have to turn back. So as we start to turn back, we've already lifted and turned right. Now we're starting to straighten the wheel. Now we've turned back. After we lift, turn, and brake and turn back, we release the brake. As soon as we release the brake by the 13-meter mark, or the 15-meter mark in this case, we're going to find that the car is going to start changing direction. And when the car starts to change direction, we need to counter steer. So we're going to lift, turn, and brake, turn back, release the brake, counter steer. As we start to get to the point of the exit, we're going to be able to get on the gas. So finally, we accelerate. Let off the gas, turn right and brake, start turning back, release the brake, counter steer, accelerate. This is where we got the thing on the back of the shirt that says blah, 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 accelerate. Everybody, including the Kiwi, just wants to hit the gas. But fact is, we need to get around that corner, and we have a front-wheel drive car. So we really need to let off the gas, turn the opposite way, blah, blah, blah. The other problem that we can have, if we realize we're going to get on the gas too soon, we can get on the brake. So if we're going to jump on the gas and have the brake on, you can actually get away with that as long as you have the brake on and stop the wheel spin. So we can come in here, and when we counter steer and accelerate, if we counter steer, add the brake and the accelerator, and then release the brake, we're going to add brake again, accelerate, and then release the brake.
Once it's lined up.
That's right. Because riding the brake at the exit is going to be the poor man's traction control.
I like that.
Right? If you just let off the brake and hit the gas, you're going wheel spin understeer straight off the road as you experience.
Now on the actual track, if we look at that track that you just drew on the right-hand side, if you can't see around that first left turn, I guess you're depending on your navigator to tell you whether it's a straightaway after that or a right turn so that you can gauge if you're
this
doing...
Would be, the co-driver would say left 3, right 3. If they were two very close together like this. If there was no distance in between the two, yeah. Left 3, right 3. If there was a bigger distance, say if it was something like this, where you had plenty of time, it might say left 3, 100, right 3.
Got it.
Or it could say, you know, 50 or whatever. So whenever you have two corners close together on the notes, there's not going to be any distance in between there. There won't, and you'll know that you're going to come out of that left into the right.
Got it. We'll go over the notation later, I take it?
Yes.
All right.
So that's the whole idea. And when we get into more complicated things like when do we shift? You come in 5th gear, you come in 4th gear, right? One might be more sensible than the other. Either way, you're going to come into this situation, eventually you're going to be the wrong gear. So most of the most of the road racers say always shift before the corner.
Right.
And that's a good thing if you know where the corner is. But sometimes we're not listening, we're not paying attention, whatever happens, all of a sudden we come in the wrong gear. We still do the same thing. Yeah. Except for when we lift, turn, and brake, release the brake and turn back, release the brake. Wait a minute. I'm sorry, I did not put turn back in there. When we turn back and release the brake, we now have time to go clutch in, shift down, clutch out, go.
So that's while you're releasing the brake and counter steering.
It's going from one slide to the next. And if you've got your initial swing right, you know you don't really need to do much. Yeah. So we're going to add shift down. Right? Because if we go in here, imagine this. Let off the gas, turn the opposite way, brake, turn back, release the brake, clutch, counter steer, shift, clutch out, gas and brake.
So the shift is before the brake again, if necessary.
Exactly. And if you do it right, you won't need to brake again. And then you can shift. But if you don't get it right, it's going to be hard to shift because you probably needed to brake again.
Got it.
And when we start doing the blip, we might as well add one more thing, right? When you do the all-wheel drive car, you got a blip. So that's when you come in and lift, turn, brake, turn back, release the brake, blip.
And then you counter steer.
The blip and then release. And I put release blip because that's got to be on the power, off the power, right? You're going to blip it when it's like this and let off to let it come around. So then you got a blip shift. Blip shift. So now how many things we got to get you to do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 things.
In 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Less than 2 seconds, yeah.
It's a little, yeah, it's around 2 seconds. All right, so we get a sense of where we use this, how we're going to use it, some of the basic elements of it. And I got to put gravel. And this is also the same. So, and this is also a braking in the turn, right? Because your turn, then brake. So, when we start looking at the next line of instruction, which is fast, medium, and slow, when you look at your workbook, which you're right on, we know that on a fast turn, we're going to have lots of gas. So we're going to brake it. We're going to have, say we might have in there, it might say 90% power. So when I say lift, lift to 90%, there's not much lifting, is there?
Yeah.
Lift to 90%, turn, and the turning is going to be, kind of minimum. And then the brake. Now the brake is going to be brake on, brake off. It's going to be a real hard brake, short amount of time. Now we're going to look up and we got this medium turn. Well, we're going to have to start braking a lot sooner and brake all the way through the corner. So we're going to lift to like, say, 60%. We're going to turn in quite a bit more, but we're going to brake at, I'm not sure what it says in there, but maybe we're going to brake
40%.
40%. So we lifted more, we turned more, and we brake less. And we brake for a longer amount of time. which the longer we brake, a lot of times we still have to counter steer. Right here, we counter steer fast, and I didn't say when to counter steer because I can't get it all in there. You counter steer fast, counter steer medium, counter steer slow or late. That's easy to remember. So on the slow turn, we got it down to the lift is like maybe 20%. The turn is a lot. Oops, I got to do a lot of turning. And then the braking is going to be almost like 10% or something ridiculous like that. So you guys got a feel for that already. If you find yourself on the lines and apexes, we're going to find out what is the most important thing. Getting all the turning done by the time you get to the turn.
Yep.
All the turning done by the time you get to the turn. Now this one, if it ends out on a straightaway, you can cut that corner and let it drift out, because we say it might end up on a straightaway. You're pretty much done by then. So what happens, the worst case situation, is you start turning in early, and now you're turning, you're still turning after the turn. Now you're still turning after the turn, and now you're on the wrong side of the road. Now you've just made this a hairpin turn. But if you'd have come out over here, you now have made this a fairly easy turn to make.
Yeah.
So if you're crowding on the left side, if you're taking a left and you're on the right side of the road, you're making the turn bigger, which means you can carry more speed.
Which is why it's so important to get those first 1 or 2 cones right. Because it just compounds the problem.
Right, if you're late, say you're late, all right, stay on the brake, counter steer, now let off the brake and turn and brake again. But by staying on the brake, instead of just staying on the gas and hoping, you stay on the brake, and that's going to make it oversteer more, and then you're going to counter steer more, but now you're going to get back on the right line. Once you realize you're late, stay on that brake, especially when you have a left into a right, in that situation.
When do you stay on the brake? One more time, please.
When you're late on the turn, say if you're late on this turn, instead of being up here where you belong, you're over here somewhere, and you stay on the brake longer and counter steer to make up for it, and that will bring you back to the line you need to be for this turn. So you fix it by staying on the brake longer.
I see.
And one of the other problems that we were having at one time, so much gas was on, that we'd let off the brake, we'd come to the corner, say we'd have a perfect line, and then we'd say, oh great, and you'd let off the brake and you get wheel spin understeer. So all you had to do is when you had that perfect line, just let off the brake slowly and it keeps it tucked in nice. But it's when you get around the corner and you let off the brake too fast, you immediately get wheel spin understeer. Now you messed your line up again. So let off the brake slower.
A lot of ways to hit trees.
There's a lot of ways to hit trees. But that's what you're learning, all the ways not to do. That's how I learned.
Right.
Okay, don't hit the tree, don't roll over, don't catch it on fire, don't go sideways over the jump, don't go understeer over the jump, don't go, okay, what's left? Well, stay on the road, don't hit anything. And
the Edison approach to rally racing.
Yeah. How many light bulbs did you make? Any questions?
What are the most? I know there are 1,000,001 ways to go off the road in rally, but what are the most common mistakes in competition? Are there any?
On the back page, the most common rally mistakes. There are more than what's in there.
There we are.
Yeah. So you can identify with some of those.
Yeah. Target fixation.
Lifting. Turning. So lifting, as you know, comes from the tendency when you have oversteer. The body's natural response is lift off the gas, fight or flight.
Yeah.
You're gonna go let off the gas. In some that in rear-wheel drive litter, that's what you do. When you throttle in a rear-wheel drive, if you give it too much gas, it oversteers, and letting off the gas straightens it out. That's perfect. But when we try it in front-wheel drive, when we have oversteer in a front-wheel drive, we let off, we spin out. So we got to learn to accelerate on an oversteer, mostly on front and all-wheel drive. If weight transfer caused the oversteer. If wheel spin caused the oversteer on a rear-wheel drive, then we lift. Lifting is what we do. What you learn is even on a rear-wheel drive, when you're in a corner and you get on the gas too much, it's going to oversteer, and instead of just letting off the gas, you should counter steer more and maybe ease off a little bit. Because even on a rear-wheel drive, if you get too much and it swings out and you let off a lot, it's still going to spin around. So lifting is only bad if you're in a front-wheel drive and you create oversteer. Turning, we've seen that when we don't have our technique down and we're not using the brakes to transfer the weight and we don't have enough ability to get it to turn, we tend to make up for it with steering.
Yeah.
So when we see our hands going crazy, we got to remind ourselves to get our feet right.
Yeah.
What was the next one? A late counter steer. Remember, late counter steer is what happens.
That was my problem with the pendulum for a while.
Right?
Yeah.
And late counter steer happens because we wait to feel the car oversteer.
Instead of
and then
anticipating.
Yeah. Instead of knowing, oh, I just turned and braked, or I let off the gas, or whatever I did, I felt the front end bite in. The next thing is back end's coming around. So when I feel the front end bite in, I got to start taking the steering out. You know, unless we're trying to make, you know, a really tight corner, in which case we're going to want to oversteer. We're going to just go from, like, say here, we might turn right and brake and let off the brake and just turn left. We won't even counter steer. We want the pendulum effect, so we go from turn to turn back. Where a regular corner, we go from turn to counter steer to turn back.
Got it.
So late on the counter steer can actually help you if you're trying to do pendulum turns.
It depends.
Not looking up, right? It depends on all the variables. That is the biggest thing with rallying. There are so many variables. So let's look at, if you was a street driver, you would only need straight line braking. That's all you need to be able to slow the car down. Now you're a road racer. Oh, you're a road racer, you need trail braking too, because that's where you have those tight corners. You want to slow down and make it turn, so that's good. So these two are really all you need for the road. Some, yes, if you're in a, you want to lift oversteer with a lot of rear-wheel drive on tarmac, you just let off the gas and it's enough to get it to oversteer on some of these tight corners. If you're a rally driver, you need to know all of these.
Yeah.
Because there's more situations. Rallying is more complicated. Like you said, there's 1,000 things that go wrong. So now you want to win a race, you've got to use the right maneuvers at the right place and don't overuse or underuse any one maneuver.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that's how you win.
Those are the Lego pieces.
Remember the 4 items I said the other day? Use the right maneuver at the right time. That's the driving element. Understand vehicles so you don't break them. Understand rally navigation so you don't drive visual navigation. And then the 4th thing is make sure you have your act together the day of the rally and you have your favorite foods and your favorite pin and your cheese and whatever you need so you don't go off the bubble. And that's how you win.